I got uninvited from my mom's birthday because, apparently, I didn't look good standing next to my sister's boyfriend. Funny thing is, turns out I was actually the guy's boss. He looked me straight in the eyes and said, "If you still plan on coming home, then stop calling me your father." 2 weeks later, on my mom's birthday, all the utilities at their house, power, water, internet, got cut off. Stick with me here. Maybe, just maybe, you'll see a bit of yourself in this story. Hey there. I'm Caleb. I'm 31 years old and live in a small town about a 45-minute drive from Seattle. Each morning starts the same. I brew myself a cup of coffee, turn on the weather report, and head to work. My commute's short, barely 5-7 minutes. I co-founded a small tech company that's all about sustainable energy. To be honest, not everyone gets what I do, especially my family. They still think I spend my days fixing machines and tightening bolts. That's never really bothered me. I've never felt the need to correct them. When people ask about my folks or my sister Amber, I usually just give a small smile and say, "It's been a while since we last talked." That's all. It's not that I'm hiding anything. I just don't see the point in digging up old stories anymore. I haven't reached out to them in over 3 years. No calls, no texts, no holidays, no birthdays. It's just been this long, quiet stretch of nothing, like the line got cut and nobody tried to fix it. I used to believe that family meant everything. But 3 years ago, right around my mom's birthday, that belief took a hit I never saw coming. It started 2 weeks before her birthday. I just booked some time off from work and made plans to visit home early. The plan was simple: show up a couple days ahead of time, stick around for a bit, help out like I always did. Nothing fancy. I just wanted to give them a heads up. I called my mom, but it was my dad who picked up after 2 rings. "I'll be home a couple days early," I told him casually. "Let me know if you need me to grab anything or help set things up." He gave me a vague response at first, then paused. When he finally spoke again, his voice sounded different, heavier, like he was carrying something he didn't want to say. "Caleb, maybe skip coming home this year, if you can." I figured he was just worried about my work schedule. "It's all good, Dad," I replied, still holding my warm mug of coffee. "I've got it covered. It's no big deal." Then there was a longer silence, and when he spoke again, it hit different, sharper and colder. "Amber's bringing her boyfriend home this year. He's someone important. Speaks well. Carries himself nicely. And your job? Well, it's hard to explain, so it's better if you just stay away." I felt heat crawl up my neck and spread across my face. My heart started racing. I tightened my grip on the coffee mug. "Excuse me," I said, trying but failing to keep my voice steady. "Are you seriously saying that to me right now?" He didn't walk it back, didn't soften the blow. Instead, he hit even harder. "If you come home, you'll just embarrass the whole family. And if you're still planning on coming, don't call me your father." Then, click, the line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly, my hands shaking and slick with sweat. The apartment was dead silent. No TV, no background noise, nothing. Just me, standing there, like someone had just pulled the rug out from under my life. His words replayed in my head on a loop, slow and sharp like a needle stuck in a groove. "You coming home would just embarrass the whole family. If you still insist on coming back, don't call me your father." For a second, I wondered if I misheard him. But no, every word had been crystal clear and colder than ice. There was no mistake, no accidental slip. It was all deliberate, final, unforgiving. I clenched my jaw. My throat felt tight, like something was stuck there that just wouldn't go down. And right then, a flood of memories came rushing back. I'd been paying their utility bills, electricity, water, internet, for over 3 years. Quietly. Nobody ever asked me to. Nobody even brought it up. And now, I was being called the embarrassment of the family? Still a little shaky, I grabbed my phone again. My mind had started to cool down, but my hands hadn't caught up. I opened my banking app and scrolled through my transactions. I just needed to see it. How much I'd spent on them over those 3 years. Electric, water, internet, all of it, month after month, like clockwork. Every single payment handled automatically, always on time. Nearly $500 a month for 36 months straight. I scrolled to the bottom. Total spent, $18,152.14. I stared at that number for a moment, not in shock, but because something inside me just went quiet. No sadness, no anger, just an empty space where something used to be. Nearly 10 grand, and I'm the one they're ashamed of? As I looked at that long list of payments, a quiet question rose in my mind, one no one in my family had ever asked in 31 years. Has Amber ever done this much for our parents? It wasn't about jealousy. I wasn't trying to earn points or seek recognition. I just couldn't help but wonder, if I'm the family's shame, who exactly are we comparing that to? I spent nearly $10,000 on them. Never asked for a thing. Never even brought it up. What about her? Has she ever had to sacrifice something? Ever swallowed her pride and asked for help? Or did she just show up, flash a pretty smile, wear a nice dress, and turn heads with her charming boyfriend? I wasn't keeping score. I was just realizing, maybe for the first time, that in our house, fairness never had a seat at the table. Since I was a kid, I'd gotten used to being on the sidelines. In family photos, I was often half-blocked by someone else or stuck off to the edge of the frame. I was barely ever looking at the camera. Nobody ever told me to step aside. But somehow, I always did. Amber was front and center for every big moment, birthdays, graduations, even her breakups. She was the reason everyone would rally together, celebrate, support. I honestly can't remember the last time someone asked me if I was okay. Amber's 2 years older than me, but the gap between us was never really about age. She was the bright one, the promise, the golden child our parents loved to brag about whenever relatives dropped by. And me? If I came up at all, it was usually just in passing. Caleb? Oh, he's doing okay, I think. Works in tech or something. For a long time, I figured that if I just kept my head down, stayed out of trouble, and handled things quietly, maybe they'd eventually notice me. But they never did. Turns out, when folks are used to not seeing you, they don't even notice when you're gone. I started paying their utility bills, power, water, internet, almost 3 years ago now. It all started with a phone call from my mom. That day, she sounded worn out. She complained about how expensive everything was getting, how the bills had jumped unexpectedly, and how their retirement checks just weren't cutting it anymore. Then, in a softer voice, kind of hesitant, she said, "If you could help us out, even just a little, it would mean a lot." I told her I would. At the time, I thought it'd be temporary, just a few months until things leveled out. But the next month looked just like the one before it. Nobody brought up stopping, and no one offered an alternative. Now and then, I'd ask, "Is Amber helping out at all, Mom?" She'd always dodge the question. Sometimes she'd say, "Just help us this month. Your sister will chip in next time." Other times it was, "Amber's handling some of your dad's medical stuff. It's not easy either." I heard those lines so often I could repeat them word for word. And every time, I just smiled and let it go, because deep down, I knew none of it was true. So I kept paying. Quietly. Reliably. Almost $500 every month, like clockwork. I didn't complain. It's not that I didn't care, it's just that, in my mind, it felt like the right thing to do. I really used to believe that if I stayed steady and responsible enough, eventually they'd see me. But now, after everything that's happened, they look me in the face and say I'm the family's shame. Eventually, the silence around me got so heavy I just sat there, frozen on the couch. My phone was still in my hand. I wasn't mad anymore, or even sad. The only thing I felt was this quiet voice inside saying, "That's enough." Right then, I opened my banking app and scrolled down to the section with my recurring payments. There they were, monthly charges for power, water, internet. I tapped on each one, and without hesitation, I canceled them. I didn't do it to get revenge. I did it to protect the one piece of myself I still had left, some shred of dignity they hadn't stripped away. About a week later, I got a text from my mom. Her tone was as soft as ever, like nothing had happened. There was no apology, no mention of what had been said. It just read, "The internet bill came in. Can you take care of it?" I looked at the screen for a long moment, then set the phone down without replying. Not to make a point, but because the very first thing she said to me wasn't, "Are you okay?" Not even a simple, "Can we talk?" Just, "Pay the bill." So I stayed silent. And to me, that silence said more than any reply ever could. 3 weeks passed before my dad tried to call. The phone rang a few times, then stopped. I didn't answer. A few minutes later, he left a voicemail. Same tone as always, sharp, rushed, impatient. "Power company called. Bill's overdue." What's going on? There was no concern. No mention of the awful things he'd said to me the day I told him I was coming home. I listened to the message, then turned the screen off and laid the phone face down on the table. And just like that, I went quiet again, all the way up to Mom's birthday. Her birthday came about 3 weeks after my dad told me not to come home. They went ahead with the party as usual, roasted chicken she loved, cake from that bakery she always liked, and a few close relatives gathered around the dinner table. Everything was planned down to the last detail. Everything except me. That afternoon, around 5 p.m., I was sitting in my living room with a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. My phone buzzed. It was Mom calling. I looked at her name on the screen for a few seconds, then set the phone down. I didn't answer. Didn't even hesitate. A few minutes later, Dad called. Then Amber. 3 calls within 10 minutes. I let them all ring out. I didn't feel curious. Didn't feel guilty. I just leaned back in my chair, looking through the foggy window. The sky was a dull gray. No rain, but the kind of cold that seeps into your bones. Winter was close. Then the texts started rolling in. Mom was first. Caleb, the power's been shut off. The whole house is dark. Please pay the bill. I stared at the message, not angry, not shocked, just hollow. It's the kind of emptiness that creeps in when you've spent years quietly carrying a family, and then realize you're the only one who ever did. Then came my dad's text. No water. We can't cook. Handle it. Right after that, Amber chimed in. Internet's down. Guests are here. Fix it. Urgently. I glanced at the clock, 6:14 p.m. I remembered it clearly. I had canceled those automatic payments 2 weeks ago, right after my father told me that if I insisted on coming home, I should never call him Dad again. And now, on the night of the birthday party I'd been pushed out of, everything went dark. Power, water, internet, all gone. Each one failed right when they needed it most. I didn't respond. Didn't explain. I just sat there, slowly turning the cold coffee mug in my hands, staring out the window like I could see past everything in front of me. And that's when it hit me. They weren't calling because they missed me. They were calling because there was no one left to carry the load. Around 7 p.m., the buzzing started again, nonstop this time. But it wasn't Mom, Dad, or Amber anymore. Now it was the relatives. The ones who only show up for the holidays, but always have something to say. The messages came in waves. Some called me ungrateful. Others said I was being disrespectful. One of them said it flat out. You embarrassed your mother in front of everyone. Another was more subtle, but just as cutting. Your sister was right. People like you ruin happy days. I read each message in silence, not because I agreed, but because I was tired. Tired of defending myself to folks who'd always side with the noise, not with what was right. I was about to set the phone down when the screen lit up again. It was Aunt Rachel, one of the only people in the family who still believed in me. She was calling through this old video app that only she and I still used. Probably because we were the last ones who thought it mattered to actually see each other during tough moments. I waited a beat, then picked up on the second ring. The first thing I saw was her face, partly shadowed by the warm, yellow light coming from the kitchen behind her. That room was burned into my memory. I knew every crack in the wall, every cabinet that squeaked. But tonight, it felt different. I could hear forks tapping plates, awkward laughs, small talk that didn't quite feel real. She looked into the camera, her expression a mix of warmth and worry. You're not going to pay for it, are you, Caleb? Her voice was light, like she wasn't sure how to even start. I looked into her eyes for a second, and when I finally spoke, it came out slow, like I was dragging words from a place I'd buried deep. You know, Andy, it was Dad. I swallowed hard. He told me not to come. He said, if I showed up anyway, I shouldn't call him my father anymore. She went quiet. Her eyes shifted, like she was taking in the room behind her with fresh eyes. Then, all hell broke loose. I heard my mom's voice rise through the background noise. Tell him I'm ashamed of him. On her birthday, of all days. How could he do this? Dad's voice came next, louder and sharper. It's not that serious. It's just some bills. What kind of man gets this petty over money? And then a third voice. I think it was my uncle. Poor Amber, stuck with a brother like that. I saw footsteps near the camera. Then Amber came into view behind Aunt Rachel. Arms crossed, face tight with frustration. He answered the call, she snapped. Mom's been crying all day. Does he even care? No shame at all. I didn't speak. I just stayed quiet and watched, because silence was the only shield I had left. I was about to hang up when another face appeared on the edge of the screen. A young guy, clean haircut, dark suit. He looked at me with a confused expression, then gave a hesitant smile. Hey, boss, he said, voice scratchy, unsure if the words even belonged in this moment. I froze. My eyes locked on the screen. Without realizing, I pulled the phone a little closer. I hadn't expected to see him there. Not tonight. Not when everyone had made it clear they were ashamed of me. I stared at him a second longer, and then it all made sense. The way he talked, his face, I knew him. He was one of the new hires we'd brought in from our southern branch. We'd exchanged a couple emails, maybe a report or two. I had no idea he was Amber's boyfriend, the guy they were all bending over backward to impress. The kitchen behind Aunt Rachel went dead still, like the room was holding its breath. She looked over her shoulder, and then the noise came crashing back. Someone whispered, "Wait, what did he just call Caleb?" Another voice chimed in, nervous. "Boss? Did he say Caleb is Amber's boyfriend's boss?" The murmurs started building, overlapping, spreading like a wave of confusion and surprise. And me? I just kept watching the screen. I didn't nod. I didn't deny it. I was just curious where it would all lead. Then the young man straightened up. He turned to the people in the room and spoke clearly. "In case you weren't aware," he said, "I work at Pacific TerraTech. Mr. Caleb is one of the company's co-founders." His words were clean, confident, loud enough to cut through the clinking silverware and chatter. And just like that, the room went silent. Not awkward, just stunned. I still didn't say a word, just gave a small, quiet nod. He looked back at the camera, eyes wide. I met his gaze and said evenly, calmly, "Hope your big introduction's going well." Then I ended the call. That night, I slept without tossing or turning. No old memories yanking me awake in the dark. For the first time in years, I felt light. Not because I was smug, but because, for once, they finally saw me for who I actually was. The next morning, before the sun had fully made it through my thin curtains, I rolled over and checked my phone. A few calendar reminders, some budget notes, and then an email from a name I didn't recognize, Tyler Brooks. I opened it. The first line hit hard. "I'm sorry, I didn't know you were Amber's brother. I've always respected you at the company." I raised an eyebrow, propped myself up, and kept reading. Hudson explained that he'd been shocked to find out about the family connection. And then, without dancing around it, he said, "I didn't expect her to be like that." He finished with, "I'll be ending this relationship. Thank you for not putting me on the spot in front of everyone." I placed the phone on my chest, closed my eyes for a second. Then I reopened the app and started typing my reply. Slow, clear, no fluff. "Hudson, that's your call to make. You don't need my approval for anything. Just think carefully before you do anything final. And for the record, I keep family out of the office." I hit send. No drama. No second thoughts. That was enough. Some things, once they're said out loud, don't need repeating. Around 9 a.m., I was finishing up a meeting with the department heads when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. Amber's name lit up the screen. I stared at it for a moment, then hit decline. Not because I was angry, not to make a statement, just because I'd had enough of apologies that only showed up once everything was already broken. 10 minutes later, a message popped up. "I'm sorry. I didn't think Hudson would change like that. You're his boss. If you said something, I'm sure he'd listen. Please, talk to him. Ask him to come back to me." That's what her message said. I stood by the hallway window for a moment, leaning my shoulder against the frame. I read it a few times, letting it sink in before I started typing. I kept my reply simple, not too short, not too long. Just enough to say what needed saying. Hudson didn't leave because I told him to. He left because of how you live, how you treat people, how you look down on what you don't understand, and because you always think that saying something softly is enough to steer folks your way. I hit send, slid the phone back into my pocket, and returned to my desk. Less than a minute later, another message popped up. "I know I messed up. This time I mean it. I'll change. Please believe me. Just this once." I didn't respond. I read it, sat with it, but nothing inside me stirred. Not because I didn't care, because I finally understood something. Sometimes, the real distance between people isn't in the apology. It's in the timing of it. So I quietly deleted the message. No fanfare, no drama, just gone. And then I went on with my day, with the life I had now. About a week later, it was a Friday afternoon. I'd just come in from the garage and stepped up to the porch, then froze. My parents were standing at my front door. Each of them had a small suitcase. They looked tired, worn out from the trip, faces pulled tight with fatigue. They didn't need to say why they were there. If they'd come all the way out here, it wasn't for a casual check-in. I opened the door and let them in. No tension, no fake smiles. Just a quiet decision not to hash things out while standing in the wind. We sat down in the living room. The tea on the table was still steaming from earlier. My dad spoke first. His voice was softer than usual, less bite, more weight. He apologized. Then Mom added her part. She said they'd been thinking things over. Maybe they'd gone too far. She said things shouldn't have come to this. I stayed quiet. I just listened, trying to figure out whether this was the end of something or the start of something new. And just like I expected, my dad's tone started to shift. We're family, Caleb. And family helps each other. We raised you, sent you to school. Everything you've got now, part of that came from us, didn't it? I looked at him. My face didn't change, but I sat up a little straighter in my chair. Then Mom chimed in, her voice soft, like she was offering a perfectly reasonable idea. If you could maybe send us about $3,000 a month, just a little help. It's not much for someone like you. I looked at them both, sitting there in my living room. These were the same people who'd once told me not to come home because I'd embarrassed them. Now here they were, trying to wrap a dollar amount around an apology. $2,000 a month. Because I was their son. Because in their minds, my success meant I owed them something. I let out a small laugh. Not mocking, not loud. Just one of those chuckles you give when something doesn't add up. I looked them both in the eyes. They stared back, waiting for me to agree, like the next move was obvious. But I wasn't mad. I'd come too far to get rattled by something like this. I leaned back in my chair, kept my voice steady and easy. What about Amber? I asked. How much is she kicking in every month? The room went still. The air felt like it tightened. Dad looked over at Mom. She hesitated before speaking, her voice dropping just a bit. Your sister's job, it's still kind of unstable. She's still heartbroken from the breakup with Hudson, my mom added softly. I nodded once. I wasn't surprised. I'd heard lines like that before, sympathetic on the surface, but really just a way to shift the focus. I lifted my eyes and looked them both straight on. If Amber agrees to support you with $3,000 a month, then I'll do the same. No more, no less. They didn't answer. They just stared at me, probably trying to figure out if I meant it. I continued, calm and steady. Or, if you want me to carry the whole amount, then I'll need it in writing. A legal agreement. Something confirming that after you both pass, the house becomes mine, fully and officially. And then I went quiet. I didn't pressure them. I didn't explain. I just waited. Because for the first time in my life, I was setting the terms. And that was new territory for them. Me not automatically saying yes. The silence in the room thickened. Then, without warning, my dad stood up. He slammed his hand down on the table, hard enough to knock over a teacup. Hot liquid trickled down the side. His voice rang out loud and angry, chest heaving. You're putting conditions on your own parents? He shouted. We raised you for over 20 years, gave you everything, and now you want to nickel and dime us. What kind of life are you living, huh? He was yelling so loud, I wouldn't be shocked if the neighbors could hear him. Still, I didn't move, didn't flinch. My hands rested calmly on the arms of my chair, and I kept my gaze locked on his. Not cold, but not soft either. Once he'd finished, I stood up, slow and deliberate. And I spoke, low and clear, but loud enough to cut through everything he'd just thrown into the room. I think it's time you both left my house. There was no rage behind it. No threats. Just a quiet sentence from someone who'd finally reached the limit of what respect, alone, could carry. No one replied. The only sound was their suitcases dragging across the floor, and then the click of the front door closing behind them. It was quieter than everything they left inside me. That was 3 years ago, right here, in this same living room. Since then, I haven't blocked their numbers. I haven't changed my email. I didn't cut them off. I just stopped reaching out. I waited to see if they'd ever reach out to me. Not for money, not out of obligation, but because they still saw me as part of the family. In 3 years, I haven't gotten a single call asking how I'm doing. No birthday wishes. No questions about my health. Not even as simple, how are you? I used to think that people could change. But over time, I've learned that some people never do, especially when they've never admitted they were wrong to begin with. These days, I still live in the same house. I go to work. I drink my morning coffee. I go on with life. The only difference? I've stopped being an emotional ATM. I don't hand out parts of myself in the name of guilt and duty. And if there's one thing all this has taught me, it's this. Family isn't defined by what people demand from you while calling it love. A real family values you, no matter what you have to offer. Not as a wallet, not as a fallback, not as a last resort when everything else crumbles. Before I wrap this up, I want to ask you something. Was I wrong for walking away? For deciding not to pay my parents $3,000 a month, even if they're older now and raised me back then? I used to believe anything could be repaired in a family. But after being treated like a stranger in my own home more times than I can count, I stood up, and I broke the cycle. Was I too cold? Maybe. Or maybe I was just learning how to finally value myself, right when it mattered most. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.